6:42 a.m. Your alarm is screaming. Your hand is already moving toward it out of pure animal instinct. 4 years of muscle memory dragging your arm across the sheets before your brain even wakes up. Then you stop. Your hand hovers over the phone. You watch it ring. You actually watch it like it's a stranger's alarm going off in a stranger's life. And for 3 full seconds you let it scream at you and you do nothing. Because for the first time since you were 22, this sound has no power over you. You silence it, slowly, like you're testing whether the world ends if you don't obey it. It doesn't end. Nothing happens. The ceiling fan just keeps doing its slow, tired spin, and you lie there in the silence, waiting for the old panic to show up the way it always used to. It doesn't come. 4 years ago, this alarm was a verdict. Guilty. Get up. Go feed a life you never actually chose. 2 hours of commute. 9 hours of meetings that could have been 3 sentences. 1 hour pretending to still care by 4:45. You did the math once, on a random Tuesday, sitting in a meeting where someone said the word synergy out loud without irony. 8 hours a day. 40 a week. 2,080 a year. You were trading your one irreplaceable life for a number on a screen that never once asked if you were okay. You didn't quit that day. You went home and opened a spreadsheet instead of the TV, sat down at the same small kitchen table you'd eaten cereal at as a kid, and stared at a blank sheet with no idea what you were actually building yet. Column A, hours worked. Column B, money made. Column C, the one that actually mattered, hours you had left before you died, having never once controlled your own Tuesday. You started small, embarrassingly small. Your first month freelancing after work, you made $340 total. For roughly 60 hours of effort squeezed into evenings and Sunday mornings you used to spend recovering from the week before. That's $5.66 an hour, less than half of what you made sitting in meetings about meetings at your actual job. You didn't tell anyone. Not your friends, not your family, not the coworker who asked why you looked exhausted every single Monday. You just said you weren't sleeping well. Technically, that was true. Was this ever going to work, or were you just quietly torching your 1 free hour a day for nothing? You asked yourself that at least once a week, usually around midnight, laptop glowing, eyes burning, watching a number move by amounts so small they felt insulting. $3 from one client, 12 from another, a trickle, not a flood. Some nights you closed the laptop and told yourself this was the night you'd stop. Then you opened it again anyway, because quitting felt worse than failing. Month 4, you lost your biggest client, the only one paying you anything close to real money. He messaged you at 9 p.m. on a Sunday, 4 lines long, said the budget got cut, said he was sorry, said good luck. You sat there staring at the message for a long time. That client was 60% of everything you'd built. You did the math and it made you sick. $204 a month, gone. Overnight. No warning, no negotiation. You almost stopped there. You actually opened your resignation letter draft that same night, the one you'd never sent, and read it back to yourself like it was a joke you'd written about someone else's life. You didn't delete it. You didn't send it either. You just closed the laptop and went to bed angry, at the client, at yourself, at how fragile the whole thing had turned out to be. You woke up the next morning and did the only thing that ever actually worked. You sent 5 more pitches before breakfast. Somewhere around month 6, you noticed something that had nothing to do with money at all. You noticed how much of your actual job wasn't work. It was theater. Meetings booked at 4:45 just to prove urgency that didn't exist. A green dot next to your name that mattered more than what you produced that day. Staying 11 minutes past 5, doing absolutely nothing, just so someone glancing across the office would clock you as committed. You remember the exact meeting that broke it open for you. 41 minutes, 6 people, 1 slide, and a decision that could have been made in a 2-line email. You sat there watching your manager nod thoughtfully at things that weren't actually said, and you thought about the $612 sitting in an account nobody at that table knew existed, money you'd made in 11 minutes that morning before anyone else woke up. You'd spent years getting graded on a performance of being busy, and the second you saw it, you couldn't unsee it, and you couldn't unsee how much of your exhaustion had never been necessary in the first place. You started building differently after that, not harder, sharper. One real question replaced 100 scattered ones. What is this job actually paying me for, and what would it cost to replace it, dollar for dollar? The number that came back was $3,400 a month. Not impossible, just consistently missing. Month 8, $612. Still nowhere close, but for the first time the number had a second digit that mattered. You told your roommate that night, casually, like it was nothing, testing how it felt to say the number out loud. He laughed and said that's basically a rounding error compared to rent. You laughed too, but something in you filed the comment away and quietly decided to prove him wrong. Month 11, $1,150. Your phone bill, your gym membership, your car payment, gone, covered entirely by something you'd built alone at a kitchen table with nobody's permission. You started declining invitations you used to say yes to out of guilt, happy hours, weekend trips you couldn't really afford. Your friends noticed you were around less. You didn't explain it well because you didn't fully understand it yet yourself. You just knew every hour you spent performing a social life you couldn't afford was an hour you weren't spending on the one thing that was actually going to change your life. Month 14, $2,890. You stared at that number for 4 full minutes. You refreshed the page twice, positive you'd made an error, positive the platform had glitched in your favor. It hadn't. You just sat there in socks, holding coffee that had gone cold an hour earlier, saying nothing, because there was nothing casual enough to say out loud that wouldn't have felt like tempting fate. Your roommate walked in, asked what was wrong with your face, and you just said you were fine, filing this number away with all the others, quietly, the way you'd learned to hold good news close until it proved it could survive. Month 19, $3,780. Rent, groceries, everything, covered without touching your day job's paycheck at all. That was also the month your car needed an $890 repair, out of nowhere, the kind of expense that used to send you into a spiral of moving numbers around on a calculator app at 1 a.m. This time you just paid it. You didn't even have to think about which bill to delay. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a spreadsheet and started feeling like a life. That was the night the fear showed up loudest. Not the excitement, the fear. What if this was a fluke? What if the second you removed the safety net, all of it collapsed at once, and you were the idiot who walked away from stability to chase a spreadsheet? You called your best friend that night, not to ask permission, just to say it out loud to another human being for the first time. He went quiet for a second, then asked the same question you'd been asking yourself for 19 months. What if it doesn't last? You told him the truth. You didn't know. You just knew that staying felt more dangerous now than leaving did. You ran worst-case scenarios in your head for hours after that call. Some weeks the number dipped hard enough to make your stomach drop, the exact same panic that used to sit at your family's kitchen table doing math with worried hands. But it always came back. Because by month 19 you weren't relying on one client, one platform, one fragile thread. You had roots. 12 different income sources, each one small enough that losing any single one barely moved the total. You gave your notice on a Wednesday. No speech, no dramatic walkout. You sat across from your manager, said the sentence you'd rehearsed in the shower a dozen times, and watched her face do the thing faces do when they're trying to look supportive while quietly filing you under replaceable. She asked what you were going to do instead. You told her the truth, that you'd been running a business on the side for over a year and a half, and you watched something shift behind her eyes, somewhere between surprise and a flicker of her own quiet envy. It didn't sting the way you expected. You'd already grieved that job alone months earlier at 11 at night when nobody was watching and nobody would have believed what you were building even if you'd shown them the spreadsheet. The 2 weeks after that felt like living in a body that already knew it was leaving. You trained your replacement, a nervous 24-year-old who reminded you painfully of yourself 4 years earlier, asking the same anxious questions about vacation days and review cycles. You wanted to tell him there was another way to live, but you knew he wouldn't believe you yet either. Some things only make sense in hindsight. You handed off passwords and folder structures and the quiet institutional knowledge nobody writes down. People kept asking if you were scared. You told them the truth. You'd already survived the scariest part, 60 hours a week making $340 a month, alone, with no proof it would ever become anything else. Everything after that felt like the easy part. You called your parents the weekend after you quit. Your dad went quiet on the phone the same way he used to go quiet whenever money came up growing up. Careful, guarded, bracing for bad news out of old habit. You told him the numbers, month by month, the $340 and the $612 and the $3,780, laid it all out like evidence in a case you'd been building for 2 years without realizing it. He didn't say congratulations right away. He asked if you had 6 months of savings first. You told him you had 8. Only then did his voice change. Only then did he say, quietly, that he wished someone had told him this was possible when he was your age. That call stayed with you longer than the resignation itself. Because you realized you weren't just changing your own Tuesday. You were the first proof in your entire family that a different kind of Tuesday was even available. Your last day, you turned in a badge that used to open every door in that building and now opened nothing. Somebody said, "See you around," the way people say it when they half expect you back in 6 months, tail between your legs, asking for your desk back. You didn't correct them. You just walked out into 2 p.m. sunlight on a Thursday, sunlight you hadn't seen on a weekday in 4 years, and stood on the sidewalk letting it register that you were never coming back inside that building again. That first Monday, no alarm. You woke up early anyway, out of habit, and lay there bracing for the old dread. It didn't come. You waited. Still nothing. Just light through the blinds and your own breathing and a silence where 4 years of panic used to live. It took a full week before your body finally believed it. Before your shoulders stopped bracing for a commute that no longer existed. Before your stomach stopped flinching every time your phone buzzed, expecting someone to need something from you right now. You checked your income the following Friday out of pure habit. The way you used to check your work email on Sunday nights, even when you swore you wouldn't. $4,120 that month, higher than you'd made in your final month at the job, and every single dollar of it came from something you built with your own hands on your own schedule, answering to nobody. You didn't post about it, you didn't need to, the number wasn't for anyone else to see. You still work. People misunderstand that part the most. Some weeks you work more hours now than you ever did at that job. But it doesn't feel like a sentence anymore. It feels like something you're building instead of something being carved out of you one Tuesday at a time. There's a difference between exhaustion that hollows you out and exhaustion that leaves you fuller than before, and you didn't understand that difference until you finally got to choose which one was yours. Some days are harder than the job ever was. Nobody warns you about the loneliness of not having a team, the discipline it takes to show up when no manager is checking whether you did. There are still slow weeks, still clients who ghost, still months that dip lower than you'd like. There was a stretch in month 23 where income dropped almost 40% for no clear reason, and you spent 3 straight nights convinced it was all unraveling, that the 14 months of proof had been a fluke after all. It wasn't. It recovered the following month, the way it always eventually did, because you'd built roots deep enough to survive a bad season instead of a single bad week. But even the hard days belong to you now. That's the entire difference. Not the absence of struggle. The presence of choice inside it. This morning your alarm goes off at 6:42, same as always. You still set it, out of habit, mostly to prove to yourself that you can hear it ring and simply not move. You let it scream for a long time. Not out of defiance, just because you can. You silence it. You get up slowly. Nobody's clocking you in. Nobody ever will again. And for the first time since you were 22 years old, that isn't a fear. It's the whole point.